Welcome. As we are moving beyond the first year of the war on Ukraine, the human cost of Russia's aggression is very clear and very stark. Nothing is like it was before. People are losing their lives, they are losing their children, parents, friends, and they are losing the world that they knew before. Their communities, their livelihoods, the opportunity to follow their passions and realize their dreams. More than a third of Ukrainians have had to leave their homes to find relative safety, either within Ukraine or abroad. Vast numbers have sustained injuries that prevent them from working. Among the adults who have found refuge abroad, 85% are women, and nearly 3/4 were employed before leaving the country. But most have not found work in the host countries, and many are in financial difficulties. But we also see resilience, we see determination and courage on the front lines, but also across society. We see people standing up, repairing the damage that is inflicted on their cities and towns, businesses and infrastructures, time and again. Men and women adjusting how they run their businesses, finding ways for their children to remain in education, and continuing to protect the strong human capital that is so essential now, but also for the eventual recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine. And we see leadership and the power that it can have to draw together a society, to be strong, to resist and to persevere in the face of aggression. I'm therefore truly honored to welcome today one of the most impressive leaders, the First Lady of Ukraine, Her Excellency Olena Zelenska. Thank you so much for joining us. And it is also my pleasure.
Thank you very much for the invitation, for inviting me.
Thank you so much. It is also my pleasure to welcome the President of the EBRD, Odile-Renaud-Basso, who is the first woman heading a multilateral development bank. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, First Lady, for accepting to join us today.
Your Excellency, let me start with you. When you became the First Lady of Ukraine in 2019, the world was quite a different place. With the onset of the full-scale war, your life, but also your role as a First Lady changed dramatically. Today, you not only act as a beacon of strength and inspiration for Ukrainians, but you also have stepped into a global role, reinforcing support for your country internationally, including being the First Lady ever to address the US Congress. How do you see this role and what does it mean for you, especially in the context of the challenges that women face in Ukraine?
Thank you very much for your warm words about my work. And of course, nobody expected when my husband became the president and I became the First Lady that we will have such unbelievable hardship ahead of us. The main thing I would like to say is that I am not doing anything which can separate me from other Ukrainians and from Ukrainian women. The war forces us to change the roles, and it's not just about me. I'm talking about all Ukrainians now, and it's understandable that I needed to be more proactive so that I could assist my country. And I have got the possibility to have a voice because of my status, and I have to use the status. I'm trying to use every platform, every political platform or humanitarian organizations which can hear me, so that I could talk about the truth of what is happening in Ukraine and the truth about Ukrainians. Indeed, I had to step out of the standards and protocol frameworks and the First Lady's roles, which are people are quite used to, especially when I'm asking and have been asking for the military aid for Ukraine. But of course, the war doesn't ask us whether we are comfortable in those roles or not, whether are appropriate. We have to follow those roles so that we could get our victory closer. I would like to talk about Ukrainian women now. This war has the face of a woman in all spheres. We are talking about the military life and the civilian life. I would not want to separate a woman out of the Ukrainian society. Yes, we are changing the roles. We are changing. It's harder for us. But as you've already said, we are constantly showing our resilience because this is our desire to live.
Thank you very much. And I think it's the way that you use your status and your voice and stepping into these new roles that is actually really so impressive and so important also for Ukraine. Odile, if I can come to you, the war has changed the lives of people in Ukraine, but also across Europe, the EBRD region and the world, really. It's also had a huge impact on the role of the EBRD. And with that, your role as its leader, with a strong mandate, and in a way also a very urgent imperative to respond to this crisis. What were your thoughts and feelings during these early days of the war, and how did this in a way shape the EBRD's response?
So the first reaction to the war, and I remember very well in the very early morning of the 24th of February, when I look at my phone and suddenly I've seen a message from one of our staff member, Ukrainian staff member, saying the war has started. And of course, there were some tensions before, there were some rumors, expectation, but still, I think we were all taken by surprise and with a huge shock of seeing this unwarranted, unjustified, unprovoked invasion of a country in Europe, so close to us, and at a time where we thought we would never see again such a war in Europe. So after the first shock, I think the EBRD really stands up, and one of the first moves we took was to take a formal decision to suspend any support to Russia and Belarus, because there were countries on which we used to intervene in Russia before 2014, and so we completely stopped, and we had all our shareholders, board members supporting this decision, and in parallel, the work started on how we can provide support to Ukraine. And for a bank, it's not so easy because it's a war situation. We didn't know how the war would evolve, and what would be the implications, the consequences for our clients, for the capacity to repay. But we very quickly started to think about how we can help our clients and our staff in Ukraine. Our Ukrainian teams were all the day long with clients and their counterparts in the country in order to understand how we could better provide support. And very quickly, we came with a package of 2 billion, resilience package for 2 billion euros, which was focusing very much on what are the key priorities for Ukraine. And we managed to get some shareholder support, donor support, very importantly, in order to help us to invest in the country. The other very important element was also the reaction of our staff, which very quickly set up some sort of spontaneous initiative, working with NGOs and community initiative in order to fundraise among the staff, among colleagues, in order to provide targeted support. And one initiative which I really appreciate very much, and I've seen them last week in the EBRD, is relating to hard work, a charitable exhibition of hard works from children, working with Art School in Ukraine, and providing support for them to buy paintings and material for children to be able to paint and to express what are their feelings and so forth. And I think it's very important in such a difficult situation. So, I mean, so frightful for children. And they were able to bring all the artworks in London to exhibit, and I was able to buy one, and a lot of colleagues bought some also. And it was amazing to see how the paintings showed, were positive and showed signals of hope with a lot of colors and lots of hope and positiveness. So I wanted to share that because it's important also to understand how our staff, and we have Ukrainian staff, but also all nationalities really contributed and felt concerned by what was going on, and willing to provide support.
Thank you very much, Odile. And indeed, I think it's that focus also on the support and the positive ways, in a way that we all come together and can help and persevere each other. Your Excellency, if I go back to you, we know that, and you've hinted at it in a way, that women are particularly affected and maybe differently affected by the war, both in their role as looking after their children, being internally displaced, being refugees. We know that the majority of refugees are women. Where do you see the specific challenges that they're facing? And importantly, what needs to be done to particularly support them?
First of all, I would like to say that apart from the fact that Ukrainian women are raped, are killed, are tortured, and this is a terrible side of this war. But apart from that, all women live in constant stress. And indeed, this is the change of role, the change of the social status, the change of the place where they live. It's a massive pressure for every woman. And in Ukraine, half of the families are separated because many men are fighting on the front line. So a woman is not just looking after the family, but sometimes a woman has a business which a husband was running before, and now she has to manage the business. Her work, which is still there, she has to feed the family, and she has got nobody to rely on. So it's the logistics and just everyday problems to solve. Psychological state of our people is quite difficult. That's why we started the national program of the mental health, because every person in any society would need hope for the future, and would need to plan. We do have hope. And of course, the only hope which we have at the moment is the hope of victory, but planning is an issue. And I'll just give you a very simple example. A child who is at school aged 9, 10 in the 3rd grade would know that next year it will be the 4th grade, 5th grade. Then after the graduation, maybe this child will choose the university or choose another route, or do something in business, start a startup. But at the moment, Ukrainian children, both abroad and in Ukraine, cannot plan, because nobody has any certainty. We don't know whether the next academic year will indeed start. We don't know whether this child will wake up or maybe die under the rubble in her own bed. So this constant pressure, this constant stress is affecting us enormously. How can we help that? I've already mentioned the national program of the mental health and mental health support. We are making it more comprehensive so that it would include a number of services for different people and different strata of society, and not just on the centralized level, but also on the community level, on the decentralized level. We are now looking at a number of projects for the centers of stress resilience. in the community so that, for example, they could help the refugees to adapt to their community, so the refugees could feel more confident there. But when we talk about the resilience, our refugees abroad, yes, massive problems here too. I would like to thank, first of all the countries who received our people, because that was saving them. I would like to remind ourselves that they all moved abroad, not because they just decided to live abroad. They had to save their families and their lives. I know that many of our foreign friends were surprised when they saw that the refugees would arrive driving good cars or being well dressed. And sometimes people just have that car, that's the only thing they've got. And there are women who were escaping from the war wearing maybe the tracksuit which they had walking the dog, or they grabbed the documents, certain things, and that was it. So to try and define now the status of the women who, first of all, changed their place of life, that's one stress. Then also they've changed their social status. Let's say she was a teacher or a manager, a senior manager in Ukraine. At the moment, when she's abroad, she is looking for work, and it's a different status, much lower status. It's great when Ukrainian women are indeed given the opportunity to work. They really want to do this. Then there is a language barrier. And it's very important to have the language courses, free courses, so that these women could socialize and adapt and find the opportunity to have employment. Another, of course, problem is a child who needs to go to school or to nursery. All the countries open this opportunity and give this opportunity to Ukrainian women. So we're very grateful for that, and let's continue with that. But when we talk about the global approach of financial institutions, international institutions, organizations of the size of EBRD, I think everything depends on the ethics of a particular organization. We are talking about transparency, we are talking about the approach to people, and I'm very grateful that you're doing this, because indeed it's important to have a feeling of being human, of being independent. And you can only do this when you are managing your life, you're in control of your life, at least of managing your needs and your family's needs before the return. Because of course, we would really want and hope that our women will return. And also wanted to thank EBRD for support given to our companies and many businesses. Many people said to us that Ukraine will not survive this winter, but we are now in the second day of spring. And not only we've survived, we've renewed quite a lot of businesses. You can't possibly imagine how happy I am to see that there is light in the apartments, in the streets. We forgot what it's like to have the streets lit up. And we are very grateful to our partners. We managed to survive this winter thanks to you. So you're doing a lot. Let's continue. Let's do it with the same speed and same support.
Thank you very much. And it's indeed very positive and very good to hear that the lights are coming back on again, and it is the second day of spring. But I also very much want to underline the point that you made about the humanity in this. People want to be recognized as being a human, being independent, being able to look after themselves and their children, having a job and having a dignity that comes with that. And that in a way leads me to Odile and what we can do in terms of ensuring that this amazing human capital that we have there is protected. and that in a way also employers, the private sector companies can play an important role in offering the jobs and the entrepreneurship opportunities, the livelihoods that are so important. Odile, can you tell us a bit more about why this focus on human capital and building human capital resilience is so important also for EBRD as part of the response that we're giving to Ukraine?
It's very important because it's clear that human capital is absolutely key for the country to be able to win the war. And I think it very much depends on its human capital. And what we've seen in this year is how resilient not only the army, but the whole people of Ukraine have been, and how much they have been able to come together, to stay together, to resist and to react and adapt to the situation, and really, stay together and fight in a very efficient manner. So I think it shows that, it's of course the war is a huge shock. It creates huge economic challenge. It also creates huge human capital challenge, but it shows that human capital is absolutely key. That's why in the support which we have been providing, which has been of 1.7 billion this year, and overall in 2 years, we aim to do 3 billion of investment. So this investment is very much in key infrastructure, energy security, food security, private sector. But in a way or another, all these projects we've been financing have a human capital dimension. And we've assessed that on 21 more out of 23 investments we've been doing this year, all have a human capital component with different dimensions. The fact that we provided a lot of support to Naftogaz to buy gas was a way, I think for us the objective was to keep the capacity for the people to have access to heating, which is in the winter is absolutely key to preserve human capital and to help people staying in the country and living through the winter in conditions that were bearable. The other thing we've been doing is when we worked a lot with Reconstruction, and the First Lady alluded to that when we finance a lot of urgent repair for the electricity network. And I must say we are completely amazed by the reactivity, the agility of the company and the capacity of its people to rebuild very quickly despite all the massive bombing from Russia. So, but part of our action with the company, and it's true with Reconstruction and it's true with Naftogaz also, is to work and help them with the workforce, to identify what was the state of play with the workforce, to plan. Because of course, the war has not only an impact on the GDP and on the growth, and the GDP which was shrunk by 30%, but it has the same sort of impact on jobs and employment level. So I think that our contribution and work with these companies to help them managing the human capital factor has been very important. And accordingly, when we provided some liquidity support or emergency support for our clients, it was also a way to give them the capacity to continue to pay the salaries, the social contribution, and this is very important for the sustainability of the economic and to keep the jobs first, and second, to generate revenues for the country to keep going. We've also worked because there is a lot of number of people have left the country, and you explained the reason why. And we also worked with recipient countries like Moldova, Croatia, Lithuania, Poland, in order to develop job opportunities and to work with possible employees outside Ukraine to facilitate them providing jobs to refugees. And I think this is a challenge because of language, of skills and so forth, but we've tried our best to facilitate, and in particular, for example, in Poland, we helped a platform, internet platform matching skills and jobs, in particular for refugees. And the last point I wanted to make is the support we provided to municipalities, for example, and we have a loan with a city of Lviv, is also a way to contribute to delivering vital infrastructure and goods that help people living through the war and supporting human capital. One example I found interesting in the kind of support is the support to the invincibility point or unbreakability points, where we provided the subsidies to facilitate access to network, so that people going there in very dire times, very difficult situation, could access internet services, call their families and so forth, which is also very important in preserving human capital, giving a sort of stability for people in very difficult time. So I will stop here, but I think that everything we've been doing, there is a dimension of human capital and targeting to this component.
Thank you very much, Odile. And I think it's really important, as you say, that we have this strong focus that we as EBRD can use the leverage we have with our clients as employers, but also as key service providers to ensure that livelihoods are protected, jobs are protected, and very importantly, that dignity in a way is also protected for people to continue to live their lives under such difficult circumstances. Your Excellency, if I can come back to you, you yourself are spearheading a range of different initiatives in this context. You have done so very much since you started your role as First Lady, but particularly with the onset of the full-scale war, you have stepped up these initiatives in many different areas. One is your barriers-free initiative, and it would be really good to hear a bit more about what that does and why that is so important in Ukraine today.
Thank you very much, and I can come back to the human capital straight away, because it's all about the human capital. We are very fortunate that our initiative on inclusivity and no barrier initiative started before the war. So we developed quite a few initiatives and programs so that we could introduce and implement them. We have created a big group of experts who were working at the Cabinet of Ministers, and also every ministry has its own sector of working and helping to work without barriers. But unfortunately, war stops quite a lot of initiatives, but at the same time, it speeds up the other initiatives, because when we talk about our program of no barriers, we are talking about the opportunity to develop human potential despite their age, their disabilities, etc. But of course, the war makes it strong and highlights those problems. If before we were talking about the disability in terms of access to the ministries and government buildings, at the moment it's a necessity, because we have a significantly higher number of those who have disabilities as a result of the war. Also, we can talk about another initiative which is called Business Without Barriers. This is a big community of private companies, of state enterprises, and they all try to do what they can for their employees and also for the clients. I can give you, as an example, a huge company which is called Ukrainian Rails. And Ukrainian Railways has got thousands of employees of different professions, and they all are very proactive in this field. They are currently working quite actively so that they could return those who are now maybe on the front line, and if they've got their disabilities, they're still finding their employees, former employees, a place where they could have a right access, whether they will have the right salary, whether they could have psychological support from their team. And for example, if they were getting the salary of 100% and now they can only work and to their 70% of capacity, this company is now working on adding these 30%, which unfortunately this person cannot cover due to the disability, so that they would have the full salary. And that is very important. Also, we try to make sure that they return to their own place of work, which they left before the war, so that they can feel confident and secure. And we work a lot on physical lack of barriers or no barriers connected with disability, because that is key. We've got the new norms for the new construction sites, so that the inclusivity and the rules of inclusivity are included into the new buildings, because it's impossible for us to have the situation where the disabled people cannot go to the shelters. We had quite difficult situations, because according to our statistics, only 20% of those who are indeed in the wheelchairs manage to get to the shelters during the air raids, because this is the risk to their lives. And we do have those barriers. We have to fight with that. And also, it's quite difficult for the people with disability to move around the city. So yes, we have got quite a lot of barriers for those people, which we have to overcome. And at the moment, as a state, we are keen to do this. And my view is that this also a big part of the renewal of the human capital, that any human and individual should live in the society as an equal member of the society. So the return to work, the return to education for their children. And only the second part of it is the renewal of the infrastructure, because our approach is we have to rebuild and renew the humans, the people first, and they will renew the infrastructure. We see it quite a lot in small towns which are outside Kiev, Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel. We can see how quickly they're being rebuilt, how many people are returning. And for us, it's very important to provide them with opportunities to live well, so that they would have schools rebuilt, they would have hospitals rebuilt, because the community can't exist without that. And I would really want to thank our partners, including EBRD, for support of our communities. And indeed, you're supporting our big enterprises which provide us with energy. Thank you. And electricity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think this at the point about the specific needs of certain groups, in particular people with disability, and the stark choices that they sometimes have to face, or inability to get into shelters, is something that is very often not really fully understood. And I think it's an area that really is very important to highlight. Odile, if I can come back to you, maybe if we move back into looking specifically at gender equality and look at what EBRD does in this context. We have a gender strategy. You've talked a lot about human capital in terms of EBRD's response. What about protecting, in a way, gender equality and ensuring that the war doesn't result in a backsliding in across many of the areas that we've already spoken about before? What are we doing here?
So indeed, we have a gender strategy, which is global, and which with a target which is to have 30% of projects in 2025 with a gender component. But I must say that in the context of the war on Ukraine, the gender issue is a sort of a different nature, very extremely important for two reasons. I would say the first one is, as the First Lady outlined at the beginning, that women are very directly affected by the war. So they are not in the front, in the military fight, but they are their role and their responsibilities and challenges have been dramatically changed by the war. When you think about the fact that a very large proportion of displaced people are women with their children that have to find their way in foreign countries with barriers of language, barriers of skill, and find their way to earn their life and ensure livelihoods, and that same with internally displaced people. So I think the challenges are, this is the first set of challenges. The second one is that everybody knows that in a war context, gender-based violence and the risk for women to be under sexual violence as well is very high, and this is something that needs to be addressed and to be taken into account in any policy we are doing. So we've been working on both sides on both issues, and we always do that, as I was mentioning before, through our support to clients. And for example, we have a very interesting project with MHP, which is a client in agribusiness, a big company in Ukraine in agribusiness, and we attached to the financing we provided to them, we had a number of components, really targeted measures targeted to women with professional training, psychological support for women in maternity leave, but also developing daycare facilities for women at work so that their children are taken care of, even when they are too young to go to school or when they can go to school. So really sort of company-based daycare facilities helping women in their jobs. We are doing the same with other clients like Naftogaz in order to reintegrate female staff and to facilitate. They need also some staff, and women need to work. So this is something which is very closely related to the war. So we try to adjust and to provide support targeted to the specific need of the situation. On gender-based violence, we have undertaken a study and also monitoring that very closely, because this is something which is deserves particular attention, focus, also on the psychological support, because I think that when you are confronted to so difficult and such difficult situation and risk, this has an impact that needs to be taken care of.
Thank you very much, Odile. And I think this, of course, is a critical element of EBRD's response, particularly now. But maybe if I come back to the First Lady, we've spoken a lot about what needs to happen now, the type of support that is required now, the specific challenges and the need to address those. But there will be a time after this war. We are looking at longer-term recovery, reconstruction. Where do you see the role of international institutions, including the EBRD, in this context to support your country, its economy, its people in particular, as part of this recovery process?
First of all, I want to note that we are already recovering ourselves, so we can see that with the energy facilities. Because we cannot wait. Frankly, many people have been skeptical about our quick recovery plans, for example, of our medical centers or of the educational institutions. And some people are saying, how do you know that tomorrow they will not be hit again and bombed again? We have to be hopeful. We have to be resilient. That's why we are recovering ourselves right now, because the longer we wait, the harder it will be. We will have problems which will be more profound ahead. We cannot just ignore the time in spite of all the challenges of the war. I'm certain that it gives us huge opportunities, and Ukraine has to use them now, has to use this window of opportunities because this unprecedentedly huge assistance we are getting from our partners allows us to quickly carry out the changes that we have planned some time ago. It's not only the opportunity, it's the need we have to speed up. We have to work more in order to recover the country eventually. Talking about the future support, when peace comes about, it's a complicated problem with gender, and I mean gender-based violence. And our experts are already saying that it may increase the domestic violence, the gender-based violence, because of the suffering people have had during the war. Even before the fully fledged invasion, we built a widespread network of shelters for the victims of domestic violence. And I think that it would be useful to continue broadening this network because more people will need those shelters, more than before. We are ready and we understand that the society will respond. To peace that will come about in different ways, and the number of crimes, violent crimes, unfortunately, may keep growing. We have to respond now. Our Ministry of Interior is working fruitfully on this problem, and we need to strengthen them thanks to the civil society. And we hope that we will have more support from the donor organizations and the big businesses in order to further build the network of such shelters. The program of psychological rehabilitation, of mental health, also requires a lot of investment because it is true that we have now analyzed what our current mental health care system is, the one we have in Ukraine now. We are ready to see that there are opportunities and possibilities. We also see our problems. The lack of professionals, the lack of experts. This is the problem number one. So we need to train them. We need to retrain them, and we are working on it now. We need to have more psychological rehabilitation centers, primarily for the military, but also for the civilians, unfortunately, because many civilians, young and older ones, they have not just the physical traumas, but psychological traumas of war. We have a number of pilot projects, for example, for psychological rehabilitation of children. But again, we need more of them. We have to teach all the experts, all the rescuers, and the ones who talk to people how to provide psychological support. And that's not just police and teachers and medical workers. We have Ukrainian employees, brave railway employees. They are now taking special courses on psychological support. People who work in the call centers and even people who work as cashiers in the supermarkets, often a lot depends on how they speak to the people. There are many areas of work here, and I think that we need support. We need your support in each area, from housing constructions to providing support to educational programs.
Роботи в цій сфері дуже багато, і я думаю, що підтримка буде потрібна на кожному з цих напрямків. Від будівництва до підтримки навчальних програм.
Thank you very much for that. And indeed, I think the challenge is there will be big opportunities in a way coming, rebuilding a better, prosperous Ukraine from the rubble, from the challenges now. But also there are real challenges in relation to rebuilding society, to bringing people back together, to mending the wounds, both the physical but also the psychological ones. And in a way using the private sector and also our engagement, civil society, in order to do that. Odile, if I can come back to you, where do you see the role of EBRD in this context when we look at the longer term recovery and reconstruction? How can we make that happen and support that?
First of all, I wanted to say I fully agree with that, what has just been said about the need to start reconstructing now. So it's not like we are just in the war and we will reconstruct later, but it's very important. And that's all our support has been about, to keep the economy going, the country functioning, to repair as quickly as possible when things are destroyed and so forth, because I think it's very important, first of all, for the country to remain in a capacity to fight, but also, to address also the psychological elements and so forth. And I also very much agree on the importance that the psychological dimension will have, the mental health issue problems and so forth, will have to be taken into account very, very seriously. And we've learned a lot from past war about that. And I think this is a dimension which, because there is, when we talk about reconstruction, usually there is a lot of focus on infrastructure destroyed and the need to rebuild physical infrastructure and so forth, but I very much agree that reconstruction will be as much on human capital than on physical capital. So I think from our perspective, EBRD, we will take that element into account, and let me take a few examples of how the construction will really increase, accelerate, and we'll have more visibility about that, what we will have to take into account. And one very concrete example is, for example, how to adapt infrastructure with injured people, war veterans, and all the accessibility issue. I think that in all the new project and reconstruction of physical infrastructure that will have to take place, it will be very important to take that into account from the beginning, but also to take into account, as I was saying, the mental health issue, and ensure that there is a healthcare capabilities in the different, in the healthcare sector, but also public services more generally, and probably also in private sector companies, that the setup is there in order to be ready to provide support. We could also think about inclusive procurement approach, for example, when working with contractors and clients, to include this human capital dimension of reskilling, training, providing support to people into account. There will be very likely quite an important work to be done on skills, because the reconstruction will probably bring new needs in the country for green skills, sustainable skills, sustainable infrastructure capabilities, and so forth. We all know that the country wants to rebuild better, in a way, greener, at the higher standards on all the dimensions. So that would call for appropriate skills in the population, and therefore this would be also an important dimension of our contribution, and something we will take into account when we will discuss with clients, with the governments, on how to take into account the need to rebuild human capital in the whole reconstruction exercise.
Thank you very much, Odile. So indeed, there is a lot that needs to happen as part of the reconstruction, but as you both just said, there's a lot that already needs to happen now, and that can happen now as we, in a way, start the recovery and reconstruction in different areas. Your Excellency, in September last year, you launched your Olena Zelenska Foundation at the UN General Assembly in New York, which in a way is set up to do exactly that, to support your country, the people in your country, across a range of different areas to sustain and live through the challenges now, but also to build up the strength and capacity, human capital for the future. Let's have a look at the video that you have brought. Thank you.
When creating such initiatives, it is vital to understand who and what you are working for. I know well whom and what for. A human is at the center of my foundation. His or her well-being. I believe that the reviving of the country begins with people, If you improve people's lives and restore strength, the whole country improves and recovers.
This is a very, very powerful video. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Can you tell us what inspired you to set up your foundation and where you see the need for it to come in to address challenges that maybe wouldn't be addressed otherwise?
Хочу розповісти про те, як він був створений, як виникла ця ідея, тому що
I want to tell you about how it was set up and how I had this idea.
вагалася, чи
It was not spontaneous. I was hesitant for a long time about whether I should take such a step, whether I would be able to be useful in this area, because there are many foundations. There is a lot of assistance of different kinds, but I just felt it was necessary at the time when I saw how quickly humanitarian problems of Ukrainians were growing inside the country, and how many more requests I would be getting personally from our foreign partners asking me how we can help. Quite often, I was asked when I was abroad, "We want to help Ukrainians. How can we do that? Perhaps we can join a project, or maybe we can rebuild a school or a hospital." And we haven't taken into account those components. It came together into a kind of a puzzle, and I had to bring those to different directions and areas altogether. So I thought I could be that mediator, the person, the organization that we set up, the foundation to bring together those people who want to provide assistance and the ones who require it. The foundation was focused on our main goal to bring back human capital to Ukraine. We have 3 areas of work: direct humanitarian aid, rebuilding, education, and the medical area. Yes, humanitarian aid is what we need today, right now, to make it possible for every person who needs it to survive through this terrible period. But this is not the strategic area. That's why we were looking for ourselves, for the reasons and philosophy and the programs that would allow us to give hope to the future. What can we do today, right now, for the people that will allow us to improve their lives, not only for the coming 2 or 3 years, but allow the country to rebuild and recover its human capital? So now the foundation focus is the programs to support the family type. How is this for children? What is the problem for the orphans in Ukraine? And they were so stunned that the war will increase as the number of children who have lost their parents, who do not feel any care from the adults. This problem keeps growing. At the same time, Ukraine has decided to cancel the institutions to get away from the large facilities. We do not want our children to be brought up, in a situation that can be compared to prison for children. Ukraine is choosing the road of family care, or something that is close to the family. Its adoption, or as an alternative, such family-type centers for children, where we already have several thousands of them in Ukraine. These are the families who would house children at the age between 5 and 10 and will bring them as children of their own. Those children, they have social benefits from the government, and to become, for example, the university students. And these children, when they come of age, they should get an apartment, a home from the government, but they need care from adults who would replace their parents. So now these families, they find themselves in a very difficult situation because there are many of them who are internally displaced. They have lost their homes, and homes for such large families mean everything. That means it's a large house where all the children can stay. And many of those families, they have children with disabilities as well. So these are some additional conditions they need. Many of such families have gone abroad and they do not have a place to come back to in Ukraine. So globally, these programs of ours are about supporting in Ukraine this element to make it more popular so that every child who is in an orphanage today would not come back to an orphanage after the war, but get a family instead. That's why we are working on it together with the support that's coming from the government. And now the first stage of this project is to make sure that the first 10 families get their houses, their homes. These are the families who are internally displaced inside the country. They have no place where they can live now. We want to have a look at this pilot project to look at what it can give us, because these should be typical. These are autonomous houses in terms of power, and they have bomb shelters. They have to take into account all the current Ukrainian realities. We are about to finalize this project. I think we will announce it next week, and we are looking for funding for the first stage for 10 houses like these to see if this works. This project, if it works, we want to upscale. That's our ambitious goal and hopes and dreams, that people would not be afraid to adopt children, to provide care to children, so that people would want to become members of this community, so that this community would feel confident to know that they will be taken care of, get support, and hope that it becomes popular. Our maximum program is that every child in Ukraine should have a home address, a childhood address, and that won't be an address of an orphanage, but a house where he or she lives and where care is provided. So this is what we really need now. We need it a lot. This is what we are living with in our foundation, and we are looking for funding for this project now.
Живемо в фундації, шукаємо фінансування на цей проект.
Thank you very much. And indeed, this is a hugely important type of assistance and role that your foundation plays, and supporting children in such difficult times and giving them not just support, but a home and a place that they can call home to grow up in. Odile, if I can come back to you, EBRD, of course, is an international organization, and it is a member of the international community as such. Where do you see its role as part of this longer term process to galvanize the international community to look at how, in combination, through coordination, we can actually support Ukraine now, but also going forward with a specific focus on human capital?
Thank you. So indeed, I think that EBRD has an important role to play. We are the institution for which Ukraine is probably the most important in terms of relative size of our involvement in the country compared with our whole balance sheet. And we have a very deep, long-standing, important role in the country. Before the war, we were the first institutional investor in the country. And we have a lot of people in the ground, not now for the time being, they are in Poland, but very much, I mean, close, working very from Ukraine, working very closely with the government and with partners in the private sector, in the public sector. So I think this gives us a special role. We've been working since the beginning of the war very closely with the other international financial institutions in order to coordinate our action, to be together, to think about how we can best provide support to Ukraine. And we are working still with them, with this close coordination and with all our donor countries in order to explain what are the challenges, where the needs are, how we can best support the country and its people, and also to play the role of a channel. I think because IFIs and an IFI like EBRD, we are a good vehicle for donors, countries that are willing to support Ukraine, to channel support in an effective manner to the country. And that's what we've been mobilizing a lot of donor support guarantees in order to be able to support the private sector and the key infrastructure and so forth. And moving forward, I think that our role will continue to be that, but also preparing for reconstruction and thinking about how we can get organized with reconstruction and supporting. A very important dimension of what we are doing is also supporting the reform agenda of the country. The country is in war, but it's transforming itself, is moving forward now with the perspective of the EU accession, which will be a key driver for reform. And we really stand ready to provide support there through the Ukraine Reform Architecture tool, which is a very important support we provide to the country, but also more generally speaking, I think that this will be also one of our key priorities moving forward, to ensure that in parallel to reconstruction, the country is really reforming itself and moving in order to have sustainable green growth and a very, good growth for its citizens. So I think that's what we will be focusing on.
Thank you very much. With this, in a way, we come to the end of our conversation, but I think there are a number of very, very important points that were made today that really resonate. One, I think, in my view, is a focus on humanity and dignity and human capital, and that really underpinning how we can support Ukrainians now, men and women and children, everybody in society there, but also as part of the longer term recovery. Also that this longer term recovery in a way is already has started, is ongoing on a day-to-day basis. Whatever we do now sows the seeds for the longer term recovery and in a way also the transformation and the sustainable growth for thriving economy, thriving society in Ukraine going forward. And we all deploy what we can, from financing to partnerships to technical assistance to policy support, working with civil society, working across partnerships in order to make that happen. As EBRD, we of course keep standing firm with Ukraine. We will be there along the way, supporting you, particularly in relation to rebuilding human capital, rebuilding this country. So thank you both again very much for joining us today. It's been a very inspirational discussion, and we look forward to continuing that strong partnership between us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Дуже дякую. Було дуже приємно спілкуватися.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.